Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. It's been a week since we last had a wee chat. I hope you're all well. And although allegedly, the COVID restrictions have been lifted, it seems that infections and sadly fatalities seem to be higher than ever. So please keep taking care, keep using your mask where you should and can, and social distance wherever you can. Keep yourself safe. This week's show, it's literally a carry on from last week, folks. You showed a great deal of interest when I had on Professor Alf Baird, Sarah Saylors and Jeff Bush, and we talked about the different routes to independence. Well, this week, I'm joined by four people who are going to help us see how do we pull all that together. And they are, in no particular order, Alison Waters, the co-chair of Now Scotland. Hi, Alison. Thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Kenny MacKaskill, MP, Deputy Leader of the Alapa Party.
Hello.
Kenny. And we've got Mark MacNaught of the SSRG group.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Roddy. Always a pleasure.
It's a pleasure as always, never a chore, Mark. Hopefully we will be joined by Ian Grant of the Scottish Independence Foundation later, and we can bring him into the discussion. But as I said in my introduction there, folks, this is a sort of carry on from the programme last week where we discussed the routes to independence. And you, Kenny, if I could start with you, you had a great article in the Scotsman this week on that very topic. And you're a great believer in a constitutional convention, city assembly, whatever you want to do it. And you think that's the way forward.
Well, yes. I mean, I think where I was coming from the article, I think there's two things. First of all, I think there should be a convention called. We've had them in the past in Scotland. I think there should be one immediately after the outcome of the election in December 2019 when Scotland rejected a Tory government yet again, and certainly a Tory government under Boris Johnson. That was talked about by the First Minister but has never been convened. I think after the local authority elections, as Alex Salmond said earlier this week, there should be a convention of elected representatives, not just MPs and MSPs, but representatives from our councils. They're the elected representatives of Scotland, and I think that should be open not just to those who support independence, but to others, because I think the first position that will have to decide is who decides for Scotland. Should it be that convention, or should it be Westminster? And I think it should be open to those who don't necessarily support independence, but who might very well take the view that they support Scotland's right of choice. That will obviously, I think, greatly be dependent upon some support from the SNP. If they refuse, given their numbers, then it's very difficult to proceed. But irrespective of that, I also think there should be a campaign convention. There are many organisations who are dealing with the cause of Scottish independence. There have been private discussions. Several of us on this programme today have had private discussions. I think there has to come a time when there should be much more public discussions, when those organisations who support independence should come together. It doesn't mean that people have to accept the direction of whoever becomes the elected, body, but there has to be some flexibility. But I do think we've got to pull together, because after the 5th of May, we have got to get our act in gear. The time has come for those, both in political parties and, the wider Yes movement and independence movement is not political parties. It's obviously rank and file. And I think that has to be brought together. The leader cannot be the First Minister, nor should it be the leader of a political party. But, previously we've been blessed by the likes of, Dennis Canavan and others. And therefore, I think, yes, to a political convention, that should hopefully come about. But in any respect, we need an independence campaign convention. And those organisations on today, and indeed others, should be coming together so that we can work in tandem. Because we've got to up the ante, because the election's coming, but the electric and gas bills that are coming in October are frightening for people. The pressure is on, action needs taken, and that's why we've got to strike.
I totally agree, and that's one of the reasons why we're having this particular programme today. I got Mark, you, and on behalf of the SSRG, you've been working towards this anyway with your group, and are looking to have a convention of sorts, which yes. You too, as Kenny's saying, you want it to be all-inclusive.
Yeah, exactly. And so we have started a series of road shows, of 10 road shows. We started last Saturday. We won't be having one this Saturday. We'll be having the following Saturday, and we'll have the schedule out in due course. We've got Jim Sillers, I believe, on the 4th of June to talk about EFTA membership and also membership relations with the RUK. We're still putting things together, so it's very much in flux. But in any case, I believe that the road shows end in early July. And then on the 29th, 30th, and 31st of July, we have reserved a venue in Dunfermline to hold a convention, and we're putting together the schedule now. I have kept various SNP MPs au courant of what we're doing, and making it clear that we would welcome their participation. At this point, and I believe we may have even secured the participation of Alex Salmond, as I understand our members of our group have had a discussion with him. So whether so we have a program that we're putting together where we're talking about many of the same things we have in our road shows. We'll have Tim Rideout to talk about currency, hopefully Jim Sillers to talk about EFTA and others. And we have Paul McCartney, who's a scholar in the United States, good friend of mine, who is going to talk about international relations. We'll certainly have Alf Baird on there. I mean, the usual suspects. But whether it at the very least, whether it constitutes this convention, I think it might as well, to bring together at least the nucleus of a group that could go on and begin seriously planning the contours of the Scottish state and how we go forward in that. And we don't know what the trigger will be for independence at this point. But given the serious lack of preparation that's evident from the Scottish government they're supposed to come out with some prospectus at the end of the year. Who's writing it? I don't know. Some consulting firm? We don't know. So I just think that points to the need for us as the SSRG and the wider and all of the amazing talent that is out there, Robin McAlpine, the Commonweal, now Scotland, and many other groups that are just aching to, help, build, the Scottish state in a form that is not, is not just a mini reproduction of Westminster. So that's what we're planning. And we have, we've reserved it. We're still very much filling in the details, but we will be inviting people from civil society, people from, MPs, MSPs, et cetera, and we'll see who comes. So, but that's very much, so again, that will be on the 29th, 30th, and 31st of July in Dunfermline.
So, Alison, you and Now Scotland, of course, you are an umbrella group. You're people of all parties and no parties, but all with the same goal. Is this the sort of thing that you feel that your organisation would get behind and support?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Now Scotland was always set up as a non-partisan grassroots organisation to begin with a really great goal of just being a home for people that didn't want to get into the party politics of the independence movement, and always wanting to capitalise on that kind of energy that we had in 2014 that we seem to have lost. It took us a while to get started, but we're ready to hit the ground running with that. We've been in talks with SSRG and other groups. We've actually got 3 emergency motions coming through Now Scotland this week. So members, please vote on them to help with funding for All Under One Banner, SSRG, and the Salvo Group, which are all intent on the same kind of work together. And it's something that we really want to participate in and help with. I think our member base gives us a unique kind of starting point. We've got access to 2,500 people across the independence movement to bring into this, and hopefully we can grow that as well as we do this.
That's fantastic. I should say before I go to Ian that we did have a representative from All Under One Banner, but at the last minute, unfortunately, something came up and they were unable to join us. But hopefully we'll have them on soon. Ian, from putting on your Scottish Independence Foundation hat, is this something that you feel that the foundation could get behind and support?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the problem we've got is that, post-election, post-local elections, I still cannot see the SNP cooperating with anybody, particularly apart from possibly the Greens, in terms of advancing towards a referendum. So the movement has to do it. But the problem with the movement at the moment is it's fragmented. We've got Now Scotland, we've got various other groups, SIC, we've got, SIF is largely a financing group. It's a group of 6 of us or 8 of us, or a small number of folk who have raised money to try and finance the movement. And we did that out of frustration, really, with the lack of progress that was being made. And we've actually handed out £250,000 of money over the last 4 years to help the movement along. But I feel it's absolutely necessary that all the groups have got to come together. Of course, each individual group, the currency group, the SSRG, of course, they should be doing their own thing in terms of using their expertise in their particular area. And there are other groups as well, Constitution for Scotland. But to give the whole thing legitimacy, I think these events have to be done sort of under an umbrella. And to that end, I sort of have tried to put together an independence forum where the individual groups join together, not to squash initiative, but to harness initiative and try and move and put pressure on the government, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If I may intervene very quickly, I just think it's important. I believe, Kenny, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the resolutions that went through at the ALBA conference recently was exactly that, to call a convention. And we at the SSRG were slightly concerned that if it was the ALBA party that was calling for the convention, that may be problematic, especially for the SNP, and that it would be important for some group like the SSRG or more, or other groups like Now Scotland, etc., to call it so that it's not perceived as partisan in nature. So I just wanted to get that in.
I think on that you're quite right, Mark. The ALBA party believes in a convention, but the convention we're talking about in terms of bringing together elected representatives will not proceed unless SNP participate. I have spoken privately to SNP MPs who are actually supportive of it. So far, they've not been prepared to speak out. Like Ian, I have to say, I share doubts as to whether the First Minister is going to eventually get round to even calling this convention that she did say at the beginning of 2020 would be called. And here we are now in the spring of 2022. So I think that's important, that it should take place, because that gives people hope. But if that doesn't happen, then we have to be bringing together the campaign groups. We've been meeting, informally. Some groups are coming together. We actually have to have a campaign convention to bring forward all those willing to take a step forward. Whether, the SNP choose to come, I'm sure individuals will come, even if they don't come as a movement, because I don't think it can be dominated by any one political party. But there has to be that campaign convention to work out tactics, because we have to keep hope alive. I've been doing meetings lately, and actually, I'm very impressed. It did remind me, partly because I was maybe doing a meeting in Coatbridge with Tommy Sheridan, and it reminded me of the early days of the poll tax campaign, and that was spectacularly successful. I remember the early days of the referendum. So there's the numbers aren't as big as they were in 2014, but the numbers are bigger than they were, say, in 2012. They're certainly bigger than when the poll tax campaign started out in 87, 88. And it took off. So I think what we've got to do is to give it a focus, to get the energy, and that encourages others, because, as I say, the biggest danger we face in the independence movement is that hope dies.
Yeah.
If people feel that nothing can change, and that the most that can be achieved is we're going to send a message to Boris Johnson. It replicates what I've been reading on Twitter about, Macron versus Le Pen. I can fully understand why 2/3 of people who voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who I would have supported were I French, will simply say, I ain't voting for either of them. One's a neo-fascist, but the other's tacking so far, he's no far off being a neo-fascist himself in terms of the attitudes he has. So if the most we can get from political leadership is send a message to Boris Johnson, folk are going to say, don't bother me with politics, son. I'm too busy trying to pay my electricity bill. That's why we've got to get the campaign going. There is life there. People are looking for leadership. There's more that unites us than divides us. We don't have to have people coming together to say this is who you've got to vote for, but we've got to get together to say this is what we're going to go out and campaign. This is where we're going to have a demonstration in March. These are policy areas we're going to look at, and we've just got to get the buzz and the vibrancy. It was there. The meetings I've done, Alloa last night, Coatbridge before, I'm doing Kirkcaldy and others. It is coming, and it's got to be, that's got to be nurtured. We've got to give people a belief that something can be done. We might not be able to say exactly what it is that's, we have to make those decisions, but we've got to say there's life in the movement yet, and, we're going to take the Tories on.
You're absolutely right, Kenny. Ian, what we need is some kind of catalyst to get things going again. The story I often put is, the Berlin Wall wasn't two guys sitting in a bar in Berlin one Friday night and went, fancy taking down the wall. All sorts of small steps had happened to get there. What do you think are the basics that we have to put in place to get people enthused again? Because I'm noticing it. There is a lot of lethargy out there, and a lot of, as Kenny puts it, people are just fed up.
Yeah, I think that's right. For example, before the wee Alba book came along, I penned out of frustration my own wee book about independence about a year ago. And at the start, perhaps, quite a lot of the S groups were taking big lots of books to distribute. Now, basically, it's individuals. Although it's quite encouraging, the number of folk that ask for 10 copies or 20 copies or whatever, and, to distribute to friends and family. And these are people who I've spoken to and who are really not members of yes groups particularly. They're not members of parties. They're just folk that want independence for Scotland. So there is, as Kenny says, there's a latent still enthusiasm there. We've just got to harness it. I think AUOB is very important in this. I mean, people mock marches to an extent, but in terms of getting folk enthused again and going out and starting campaigning, I think the marches are really very important. Mm-hmm. And I think making Glasgow and the subsequent marches across the country work is one thing that's very important. I think the other thing that is important is that people see progress, because, I think one of the issues, the SNP and many others say, all these, dissidents, if you like, in Alba and in now Scotland and so what, all they want is a referendum. No, we don't, because at the moment we're not prepared for a referendum. What we need basically is to get this case for independence watertight and do it extremely quickly this summer, basically, have everything in place and agreed pressure. And having done that, we need to really put pressure on the Scottish Government. And to do that, I think basically we have to have a broad support. We have to have all the groups, SSRG, SIC, Now Scotland, all the various groups must unite, I think, and commonweal, and actually put a common front to the Scottish Government to say, look, get moving.
Yeah. Alison, you've got a large group of people. Mm-hmm. I think you said a couple of thousand. Do you see with them or feel with them that they would get behind, for example, the Glasgow March? If we said, let's make that the kickstart, just for the sake of debate today, the Glasgow March, let's make that the kickstart to get this campaign on the road. Do you think your members would react to that?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of our members go to these things anyway. They're active people within the movement. They're activists that want to be doing something. And the mood in the last couple of months specifically, I noticed what Kenny says, people are eager again, and people do feel like revitalised to get on with the campaign. And one of the things that we get at stalls we do at AUOB marches or at meetings that we have monthly and membership meetings is people want more action. They're not sure themselves necessarily how to do it, but they want it, and they're looking to us to be that kind of catalyst for them. So yeah, it's something that Now Scotland could do easily is really G up our members. We're putting on a bus to All Under One Banners Glasgow March from Edinburgh. We've already got that one booked. And we always offer to put them on from other areas if members want to come. So it's something we like to help people get to marches. We pay for a certain amount of the buses and charge a small fee just to cover the tickets. But we also offer them to people at concessions prices or free, even if they can't afford it. So we don't want money to be an object either. But it's definitely something that Now Scotland will get behind and is willing to help further.
I don't want to be a cynic, Kenny, but or to quote a Tory, but a week in politics is a long time, as a famous unionist once said. Should the results, could go the wrong way, shall we say, for the governing party, would that, knowing politicians, maybe be a catalyst for people to say, we need to get moving?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think irrespective of how it goes, we need to get moving because, there's despair out there. I mean, I'm currently up just for the weekend. I'm back down to Dunbar. I'm in London, in the wee place we've got in Aberlour. My wife's telling me that Murray Food Bank are running out of food. We're not talking about East End Glasgow. We're not talking about Greenock or the areas that are viewed as the pride in Scotland. We're talking about Murray, but it is areas of deprivation. And the poverty that is coming in Scotland, screaming down the tracks, demands that we take action. That's why I go back. After the election in December 2019, that's when a convention should have been called that should have included all the opposition parties in Scotland, including Labour and the Liberal Democrats, to say we did not vote for this Prime Minister, and nothing has been done. So I think irrespective of the outcome of this election, I would first of all prefer that, as I say, we got the elected members convention moving. But other than that, we most certainly need to get the independence activist convention together so that we get our own act in gear and start moving. Because there are things we're going to have to be doing to advising people about how we protect them from poverty, how we can, provide advice, whatever that may be. So as I say, it is back to the early days of the poll tax campaign. There is an issue out there, and we all know that what actually will persuade people to vote for independence isn't simply, as I would, and all of us here would vote for Scotland per se because we believe in independence, but we have got to get the message across. Scotland is energy rich and our people are fuel poor. They're not only fuel poor, they're going to be unable to access their fuel. So we have got to get that message across. It isn't the fault of a war in Ukraine. It isn't just because Shell aren't paying any taxes on the North Sea. It's because of a political decision where the oil, the gas, and now the offshore renewables of Scotland that should see our people able to have energy at almost cost-free price, as well as providing jobs, for our communities, that we actually get benefit. So I think we've got to get motivated, we've got to get angry, we've got to protect people, and that's why we've got to come together. And, if the SNP, and we're talking about them, choose not to come on board, that's fine. I'm sure what we'll see is more and more individuals will begin to walk. There will probably still be members of the SNP, and that's their choice. But I think they'll take the view that they're going to do something for independence, because even at meetings I was at this week, I was meeting people who are, still in the SNP, hoping that things will change, but actually happy to work together with others. So that's where I think it falls to, the Independence Foundation, to Now Scotland, to whoever. I don't think it should be ALBAs, it shouldn't be the SNP, but, these organisations should come together. Let's get all under, one umbrella and start discussing these things and work out strategy, tactics, and take it from there. And there's some things that we won't be able to agree on about which party you should vote for. We shouldn't be asking for that. It's how do we get the campaign going? And that's what we've got to do. So, after the 5th of May, irrespective of how it goes, that's what we've got to do. I think if the results don't go as the SNP expect them to or hope, then more individuals will be putting pressure within the SNP that certainly will probably say, well, if they're not doing anything, we'll go and work with the people who are. And better a willing volunteer than a reluctant conscript.
Indeed. Mark, harken back to the great old days of 2014, where those of us who were involved, it was probably the greatest time of our lives, politically speaking. It was marvellous.
No,
If we remember it back, the Yes Group was sort of set up, and it was to be an umbrella group, and it was going to do this, that, and the next thing. But suddenly, the groundswell came, and the people took over. And it got a mind of its own, and it just suddenly all exploded. That's what we need to happen again.
No, I agree. But there needs to be something tangible out there. I think everybody is looking for that catalyst, and people say, oh, it should, just set the date and then that'll be the catalyst. But I'm a little bit more wary in the sense that I think that there needs to be much more a concrete vision of what Scotland will be presented, because the whole idea, I mean, I've spoken to many people who said, well, if Scotland becomes independent and it's just another mini Westminster, what's the point? There has to be, and I remember back in 2014 when I started writing articles for Newsnet, actually in 2012, and I felt like there's just such a it just seems like it's such a no-brainer for me that Scotland should become independent. It should write a modern constitution, get rid of the monarchy, have it much more egalitarian based, have much greater controls over campaign finance, and making sure that the government is operates with ethics, things that are enforceable, and things that can rules and things that can be put into a constitution that could make this a reality. Publicly financed campaigns, secure electronic voting. All of these, and also automatic registration of voting from the age of 16 that can't be revoked unless for some reason that is. And these are kind of basic things that can be implemented from the beginning, and that can be put out as this is what you will get when it becomes independent. Because I felt as if in 2014, I know there was the white paper, the 500-page white paper, whatever, that people really weren't able to absorb. But I had a lot of people said, well, if they get rid of the monarchy, of course I'll vote for it. But if not, then, but there was always that kind of reluctance I felt on the part of, the yes movement to say, we'll keep the Queen, or we'll do this, or we'll do that. We're not going to rock the boat. And I think that it's a very different environment now, given Brexit, given all of these, these exigent circumstances, to where I think that, what we're doing in this SSRG and starting from this conference, we need to start planning the Scottish state. What is it going to be? How is it going to be constructed? Is there going to be a second chamber? What will be the monetary policy? Will there be and plan it out in broad daylight? I think that's very important as well, because given the fact that I teach American, constitutional law and American history, and the American Constitution was written in secret by a bunch of oligarchs, basically, and they constructed it specifically to keep the oligarchy in power. And if that was to happen for Scotland, that would just be a terrible, terrible waste. And so there has to be broad-based input on the way that the Constitution and the state is written, is constructed. And there's no reason that even if the trigger hasn't been pulled, whatever that may be, plebiscitary election, MPs were withdrawing from the Treaty of Union, whatever, the planning can start. It can start now, and we've been working on it, but on a much more public level, to see people say, oh, okay, oh, all right, I'd vote for that, or I would support that, because at this point it's too nebulous. Even if Nicola Sturgeon, okay, she calls a referendum, and there's this prospectus. What's the prospectus? Who wrote it? What is it? And then the idea that even if there was this, in 2023 referendum, and then they pop out they release this prospectus in, say, December for a referendum, say in December of 2023. That's not enough time to really get to people, so I just think that there's no reason we can't start the planning now, and that's very much what we've been doing at the SSRG, and what we hope to really bring to a much broader scale with the conference at the end of July.
So I was just thinking, you were saying you teach American history. That must be a very short course.
It's so corrupt, though.
I couldn't resist that. Ian, last week we had Alf on, and Alf was saying, all those things that Mark's saying there, we need to get out to the people. I agree. But what Alf was also saying was that we need to teach people really what they've not got, and that their language has been stolen from them. And it's not just about your pension or whether you're going to be 50 quid better off or worse off. Here's what you're missing: your true democracy, your language, your culture, all those things. That's as important to get that message out to the people as well, is it not?
I think it is. You know, the people go on about saying you've got to make the case for independence in a sort of nebulous sort of way. I mean, we have to make the case for independence, and part of that case is the cultural one. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Our broadcasting is abysmal in this country. I mean, it's from a foreign country, basically. Our languages have been belted out of us at school.
Yeah.
You know, and the cultural side of, you only have to look at the BBC or STV and look at the lack of Scottish content on both of them. So there are these cultural issues, but as well as the case for, you know, the why of independence, I think people have to know how you're going to get independence. I mean, we need to create a narrative which is plausible, really. You know, at the moment, people are talking about going to a referendum and having a vote, and, you know, and without really knowing how this is properly going to come about. And so I think we've got to tell them how it will happen. And then again, I think we have to give them an idea of what sort of Scotland it's going to be, which means painting a picture, not just comparing Scotland with England or London, but comparing it with European countries and what can be achieved in Northern European small countries, which can be prosperous, which can look after their energy assets, and which can escape poverty. And so, yes, I think we absolutely have an awful lot of work to do in that direction. Yeah.
But, Alison, another place we've got to get back to, back in 2014 again, I hate to hark back, but it is a point of reference. One of the places where we had a great deal of success was we went into the schemes in the cities and we spoke to the dispossessed, the people who really will benefit the most, the people with the least at the moment, who will get the greatest benefit. And we convinced them to register for their vote. I mean, I don't know how many we registered. I know how many. I did hundreds of people I registered. Yeah. And then they voted and nothing changed, nothing happened. We've got to get back in and we've got to ask them again for one more chance. That is, in my humble opinion, I don't know how you think, but that's what we ask you, is the key to success for us, is to get those people, the really underprivileged, get them enthused.
Yep, the disaffected people in this country. And it's funny, it kind of leads on to something that I've posted on Twitter about recently and talked about the stories that I'm hearing from the poorest people in Scotland over the last couple of weeks about how they're struggling. And it's not a cost of living crisis for them, it's a cost of existing crisis, because they're not really living a real life at the moment. It's merely just eking out a minor existence. And as I termed it on the latest poster I made for Now Scotland, we don't have a cost of living crisis, we have a cost of the union crisis in Scotland. And what that's doing to people. And the most disaffected areas are the people that absolutely will benefit from this the most. And we need to reach them again. And all right, they might not trust us because last time they voted and they listened to us and nothing changed and it got worse because Brexit happened. But we have to show them, like Mark says, that we are already planning for a better nation. You know, and this isn't just a case of we promised this after independence, this is what you could have. We have to go to them and say, this is what we are doing right now to make a change. And not just try and affect change post-independence, but from today, from the minute we decide to set this in motion and make Scotland better now and in the run-up to and after independence as well.
And I felt that was lacking in 2014. I thought from the beginning, even the first articles I was writing for Newsnet, is like put out a vision. Okay, we're gonna have we're gonna have a written constitution. We're gonna have this. We can get rid of the monarchy. We can do that. But it just wasn't forthcoming. It was like they were. It was like a lot of the Yes movement was kind of petrified about. Oh, we can't offend the Queen. We can't do this. We can't do that.
I have to say I disagree with that, Mark. I mean, I think there was the next, I know there's not going to be a referendum in 23. I think at some stage I always take the view there has to be at least a referendum put to the Scottish people to say yes or no, as happened indeed in Ireland in December 1921. But, in the absence of a referendum taking place in 2023, then the likelihood is we're going to have to find other ways or force it, because it's certainly not coming then.
Yeah.
But it will be a different referendum from 2014. I don't think we should berate what was done in 2014.
No, I wasn't.
We took on at a stage, we had 20 to 25% of the vote. We were only given a referendum because the Tories were absolutely certain that not only would they win it, but they would crush the SNP and the independence movement, not just once, but forever. We faced big business. We had the threat of RBS removing to London. We had ASDA saying, that they would consider it would be diabolical for Scotland. We even had President Obama tweeting, never mind Premiers Harper and whoever it was in Australia. And despite that, we came to 45%. It was a remarkable result. And in the areas that were most deprived, as we've been talking about, people were excited. It was hope. It was about change. There was a tactical reason about why we took the view that nothing would change other than, to quote, I think it was Tommy Shepherd, other than the right to change absolutely everything. Holyrood would be in charge of everything, but we'd be members of the EU. The monarch would still be there for a later date. We would still be in NATO. It was no change. The world has changed since then, which is why I think the positions I take on NATO, that I take on the monarchy, have all changed. But I think the position in 2014 was the right position, and we came damn close, despite all the impediments we faced from President Barroso. And I think the important thing now that we have to always remember, and it's the wee speech I say, risk has changed. Risk has changed. The risk in 2014 was leaving the UK. The risk was you would be out with the EU. The risk was sterling, the Scottish currency would plummet. The risk was you wouldn't have the strength of the UK. As it is, Brexit has happened. Sterling's now reached its lowest level since 2020, I saw on Twitter, and crashing again. And indeed, as for the great, Britain a force for good, that is a joke. So the risk now is actually in staying in Britain, because yes, I think Johnson will be gone probably by the end of, if not the end of the summer, certainly the end of the year. But whoever replaces him will be worse, at bad, if not worse. This idea that you're going to get rid of Johnson and get somebody benign. No, we got rid of Heath and we got Thatcher. We got rid of Thatcher and we got Major, and it's gone on. Whoever comes in after Johnson will have been culpable in keeping Johnson in power and supporting the kleptocracy. That is why the risk has changed. So I don't think we should beat ourselves up about 2014. We did a damn good job. A bit more luck than we'd have got there. Equally, the next campaign, whether it's for a plebiscite election, whether it's for a referendum, whether it's just to mobilise the people of Scotland, and that's where I think we should be going. It's not, it has to be a referendum, it has to be this. We've just got to say to the people of Scotland, we ain't taking it no more. We ain't taking it no more. We didn't vote for this. We didn't vote for you to put the boot into our working people. We didn't vote for you to crush the poor under their heel. We ain't taking it anymore. We've got to mobilise people in a whole variety of ways to just say we ain't taking it anymore. That's what we did with the poll tax, and we brought down the Iron Lady. That's where we came so close in 2014, and that's what we've got to get cracking on after the 5th of May.
It's a point about Alison made, of course, about heading for the schemes and the poorest folk in society. I think one of the things we have to think about as well is that we tailor our message for the different parts of Scotland. For example, the Highlands have got awful problems with a lack of rural housing, so that in Skye you've got plenty of jobs, but you've got nowhere that folk can live in because of lots of reasons, second homes, long short-term lets, etc. And we've also got to tailor our message for the northeast, which is an area which feels sort of left out. Tailor our message for the borders, because we want a Scotland that's inclusive totally, geographically and socially, and also I think to maximise our vote, we cannot neglect any area of Scotland or indeed any social class in Scotland.
Yep.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And
But here's the thing, Alison, I mentioned it last week to the guys that were on, is if we look at Brexit, Brexit was won with a bus with just one wee slogan on it, not a 500-page tome. Then Farage, again with a bus, won it, the European election. Nicola Sturgeon got her SNP 1-2 bus. People do like things in small chunks that they can understand. Now, we, the Anoraks, we love the detail of the Constitution, the claim of right, but we need to keep it simple, stupid, as I was taught in my working career, so that the people can understand and buy into something.
yeah, absolutely. I think bite-sized information that's easy to digest is really important when you're out on the doorsteps and on stalls and at marches, that you can give someone something that they can take away that's not an essay to read. That they can say to their pals in a pub next week, oh, guess what I read on this leaflet, or so and so Kenny MacKaskill was at my door and he told me this. It's got to be information that's easily passed on, easy to digest. Not because we belittle the Scottish people and don't think they're smart enough, but just because politics for those of the public that aren't like us isn't something that their everyday language includes, that their everyday lives are interested in. So it's important that we deliver it to them in a way that they want to take it in, you know?
Well, I agree. I have to say, no, I think you're right, Alison. Information's power. I look back to the strength of the poll tax campaign was we told people, that's why we said don't avoid registration because you can get fined. Go for non-payment.
Can't pay, won't pay.
What might happen? All of these things. We told them what would happen if the poll tax did get enforced, how it would undermine local authorities, and we've got to do that because I come back. I think the big issue is fuel. That is what is critical to people, and we've got to get that message across. We've got to get the message across. We're trying to do that in Albion. We've got to do across the board. It is absurd. But Scotland is, the energy rich, the energy capital almost of Europe, especially with renewables, and yet we have this situation where probably half of our people come October, over half will be in fuel poverty. That is absolutely absurd. And we have a situation, because I've been asking parliamentary questions, those who are the poorest are on prepaid meters who pay the highest charges. Now, that's not a technical issue. That could easily be dealt with. It's not that difficult for Scottish Power and SSE, Ofgem, if they had the powers, because they take conditions from the UK government. So it's not a technical issue. You could make people like myself who are on credit pay a wee bit more so that those on prepaid wouldn't be paying significantly higher. The reason it doesn't come about is the Tory government won't direct Ofgem to enforce it. We've got to get that message out there because people shouldn't be having to go out and buying a tenner card and finding that they've kept their energy off all weekend, that £8 of it's gone on standing charges before they've even managed to get £2 on. So we've got to make that clear because I think, if we want to mobilise and galvanise people in Scotland, not just those who are poor and suffering with their fuel, but those who just look at it and say, Christ, I can manage. I'm looking at the increase in my bills and I'm thinking, how are people who aren't on a parliamentary salary managing to cope? So I think, we've got to get out there. This is our opportunity. Yes, it's about an independent Scotland for an independent Scotland's sake, for the defence of our culture. But to get really moving over this summer, running into October, we've got to be out there banging there because the SNP took off in the late 60s and the 70s with Scotland's oil, all those posters about, poor waif kids in Glasgow in the 1960s and 70s. It's his oil, her oil. We've got to get the message out there. It's our offshore renewables. It's coming ashore at East Lothian in my constituency and it's getting cabled down to the northeast of England. We're getting no revenue. We're getting no jobs. We're getting absolutely no benefit from it and our people aren't able to keep their home. That's the message we've got to get people angry. Because we get people angry to say this ain't right, then then we'll get moving.
Taking it a step further, Mark. Can I just take it a step further? Ken's right. We've got to get people angry. And if we go back to again the poll tax, which was the other famous one was can pay, won't pay, and we encourage civil disobedience. We shouldn't be scared now to encourage civil disobedience. As part of an overall campaign, or do you think that would be detrimental to the movement?
I think you have to pick your moments. I mean, if somebody was asking me about a non-payment campaign for for fuel, I mean, I wish it was so simple. The problem is, if you don't pay, they just switch you off, and it becomes much harder. And they say, well, what about trying to go around it? Well, the last thing I want is somebody electrocuting themselves because they're trying to put their meter. So I think at the end of the day, all organisations, all movements have to reserve the right, and that's what we have to do. Equally, at the present moment, I think we encourage people to obey the law. Certainly, when they look at a prime minister that doesn't, but there are occasions, and the poll tax campaign was one when a law is so iniquitous, when circumstances are so wrong, that I was more than happy, despite being a qualified lawyer and in legal practice at that time, to say I wasn't paying. There may come an opportunity or a situation, so we reserve the right to cross that. I think at the moment, what we've got to do is just to have a civilised, law-abiding campaign. And to some extent, it goes back to the failure since 2015. We have had no campaign. We have got to, we've got to build it up again. But, as Alison and Ian were saying, there is a pulse here. All we've got to do is actually give it a wee bit of glucose and, get it going again. And people will be moving. So it's about encouragement. And I agree with what Alison's saying. We've got to have those information sheets. I've got folk in my office working on that at the moment. We've got to have the briefing there so that people can be given the information on the street, so that they can then, as happens in the poll tax campaign, if the activists know, they can take the people in the street, they can give people information that's easily readable, that they can tell their neighbours. Did you know that you pay significantly more on prepaid? It's not something dictated by God or the environment. It's dictated by a Tory government. It could change. Do you know we've got more energy than we require? The cost of the rising fuel crisis, nothing to do with the war in Ukraine. It's all to do with how the UK government sets the price levels. All of these things, that's information we've got to get out there so that, we can't hit every door. But if we tell enough people, they tell their pals. And as I say, that was the strength of the campaign. That was how the poll tax campaign got out there. Everybody became a street lawyer on non-payment and civil disobedience. So there's things we've got to get out there. At the moment, it's on energy. I don't rule out civil disobedience, but I can't see the circumstances at the present moment. But equally, what we've got to do, as I say, is galvanise a campaign to say, this ain't right. There is a way to change it, and the way to change it is for us to be in charge of our own country.
Yeah.
What I would just like to interject is, a lot of people misunderstand the term civil disobedience sometimes, and it's because a lot of people look to the extreme versions of it from Extinction Rebellion, where they glue themselves to bus tops or buildings. And remember that civil disobedience is our marches that we do, we all under one banner, or the protests that now Scotland are doing at the UK government hub. They can be law-abiding but still cause disruption, and that's one of the things that I think we should look to first before anybody ever considers breaking the law. That's always a last resort, and as Kenny says, there's the right time and place for that on occasion, like with the poll tax, but I don't think we're there yet. But there's things that we can do. There's been a couple of campaigns on Twitter over the last couple of weeks for mass switch off of energy, because it does cost the energy companies. Things like that we can galvanise the movement by informing them what activists can do that hits these people where it hurts them, but doesn't compromise their safety or their liberty as well.
Mark, you live in France. Our good French friends are used to a bit of revolution, and of course brought us the guillotine and whatnot and the tumbrils. But when they've got a problem, they don't think twice about getting the lorry drivers out or the farmers to block the roads.
Absolutely, and the government regulates things better. I mean,
and they give it quick.
Yeah, EDF, GDF, they're owned. They're majority government owned, and basically they do have shareholders, but they were able to say to the shareholders, "Well, you're not going to make it big, and you're not going to make big profits off this because we want to keep the prices down." At the local pump, initially the price of diesel went up to nearly 220 euros a liter, and then the government had a program where they pay for to bring the price down to where now it's at 180. Still expensive, but they take measures to control it. It's the same with gas. I have a contract with a company that provide where I pay the gas thing, but they have the capacity to regulate it and regulate it pretty well to where prices are higher. I mean, I go to the grocery store. I just paid 16 euros for a chicken. I've never done that before. you know, and there is inflation, and you have to, you know, be careful about where you buy things, and, you know, be much more cost conscious. And I say that as a middle class person who owns a salary. I'm not saying that as a person who has to scrimp, and, you know, but again, and the same with banks, the same with so many things. You know, France is a government which regulates the economy pretty well, in my view, and makes for, and you know, there are poor people, there are homeless people like anywhere else, but the government is much more set up to help to equalize.
Is it correct? Sorry to interrupt, but is that not the fact? Because the government in France is scared of the people, not that
Yes.
unlike the UK, where the people are scared of the bloody government.
No,
That's
exactly.
the problem.
Yeah, well,
That is the problem.
exactly. And early on in Macron's first term, I'm assuming he'll probably get a second term, but he came in, you know, he was a banker. He wanted to, you know, change the pension system, and the whole country went on strike. And once COVID came on, and said, "Oh, forget it," you know, or maybe he's got some intentions to try to do it, but the French, they won't let it pass, man. There's no way.
No, they won't.
You know,
They won't.
and but they have it. Here in France, they have this stuff written into law in a way that it's not in the UK, and you just, you know, and as you say, the you know, the people won't hesitate to come out. I've had the university where I work, that's been blocked several times over the years that I've been here, to where, you know, there were like 8 weeks where classes didn't take place because they were totally blocking it. So that hasn't happened much more recently, but you know, it's a much more activist. And as you say, the politicians are much more fearful of the people than the other way around. So
as it should be. Ian, before we, you know, with that in mind, and going back to where we began this discussion about inclusiveness, it's also important that we, the people here, in the broader sense, that we get the trade unions involved. You know, because if we can get them motivated as well, then why can't we block the arteries out of Scotland as a protest to get something? Why can't we do that? Because we've never done it. Let's do it.
Well, I mean, part of the problem, I think individual trade unionists are probably, gosh, I mean, 50% plus, yes. And so, I mean, we've probably won the individuals, but of course, they're members of unions which are largely UK based. And so, action by workers is probably may or may not be feasible through the actual trade unions themselves. But a number of fairly prominent trade unionists have come on board. I still think, from my point of view, we've been talking slightly about the campaign rather more than about the mechanism of how we're going to get there. I would just, before winding up, want to say that we absolutely have to get a sort of coming together of the movement, that
I agree.
Important folk from the various groups have got to get together and have got to plan the next step of the campaign. And the next step of the campaign is influencing the Scottish government as at least as much as influencing the UK government. And I think we've got to brace ourselves for the fact that we're not going to get readily a referendum. You know, we're certainly not going to get a Section 30 order. And if the Scottish Parliament puts through a bill, an act, it's not going to get the royal assent or whatever you get. And so we are looking towards a general election as the mechanism that we're going to get independence. So, of course, we've got to get on the streets. We've got to put pressure on the Scottish government and as well as the British government, of course. And we've got to energise the people. That's absolutely correct, and what we've been talking about. But at the same time, we've got to construct a structure that is going to take us the next step of the way, and that is going to be quite some undertaking, I think.
Well, that's got to be your takeaway today, all you people, your positions that you're here in, is to take it and to guarantee that you're going to pull the things together. And can I just say, well, the clock's beating us, but I would think we're being unfair. I think if that lovely Mrs. Patel or that proud Scot, Mr. Gove, takes over, they would rush to give us a Section 30 and help us leave the Union because they're such kind people. But can I thank you all for taking part tonight? As I say, the clock always beats us. And can I thank you for what you've done and said here today, and wish you all well in your endeavours to get our nation its freedom. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, Roddy. Thanks for having us.
So a big thank you to my guests here. I hope you found that informative. Got your enthusiasm up and give you some ideas. So if you're in Now Scotland, or you're in the Scottish Independence Foundation, or the Alapa Party, or the SNP, or all under one banner, whatever one you're in, listen to them, join in, let's get moving. We can't depend on the politicians all the time, and we certainly can't depend on the Scottish National Party government. So please do your best. And until I see you and yours again, please, please, please take care.
Elsewhere in your manifesto, a lot of stuff that could be suggested. You're putting together a bunch of stuff people want to hear. There's £500 for every low-earning household, school meals free for every child, £200 million spent on free sports facility for kids, a council tax freeze. Where's all that money coming from?
Well,
Councils are
let's take the first of these, £500 for low-income households, people in receipt of council tax reductions. That's already happening in Inverclyde. The payments are going out next week. For 10,000 people in Inverclyde in that category. Now, if it can happen in the Inverclyde Council, incidentally,
let's look at the hundreds of millions of pounds. Where's the money coming from?
If it can happen in Inverclyde Council, supported by the Alapa councillors on that council, why can't it happen to the other 500,000 households in Scotland in that category? It would cost about £250 million, a fraction of the Scottish budget. Indeed, the entire programme, which you've kindly read out some of the key elements of, would cost about £1.3 billion, which is 2.45% of the Scottish budget. Now, I had a rule of thumb when I was First Minister. If you had to find money under 3% of the revenue budget of Scotland, it could be found if you had the political will to do so.
Okay.
Or take another example, Martin. The councils around Scotland just now have £3 billion in reserves, £500 million unallocated. They're saving it for a rainy day. Well, I've got news. It's raining. The water's getting in, families are suffering, and it's time to do something about it.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.